This is the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. I'm Kevin Scholla.
Lawlessness will not be accepted by the American people. That's not what he was elected to do, was to create his own laws as he goes along.
Sarah Palin is known for speaking her mind, not being afraid to express her opinions, fighting for what she believes in. Our guest today can be described in a very similar fashion. Talk show host, author, writer, Tammy Bruce is here. Sarah Palin makes a case for the impeachment of President Obama. Amazing America is renewed for another season. We strap in with the Colonel once again. Rob Maness joins us from Louisiana. A brand new Commonwealth Common Sense with Susan Stimson is coming up. And just ahead, our latest edition of Steel Resolve with Sarah Steelman. First, we welcome in Tammy Bruce. She is a radio talk show host, an author, a columnist, and one of my favorites. Tammy Bruce, welcome to the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for asking me.
You know, I thought of you this past week. Sarah Palin called for the impeachment of President Obama, and it reminded me of what you said in Stephen Bannon's movie, The Undefeated, paraphrasing here, but you said, you know, that like a Marine, Palin runs toward danger instead of away from it. Is this an example of that?
Yeah, and there's a lot of debate about the suggestion, but I think that at least what it does, and I think what's important about the conversations that can be generated with someone as influential as Governor Palin, is that it does get discussed, that even the notion of the discussion, that is something that should be considered, reminds people of the circumstances we're in, reminds us of Obama's incompetence, and even his dangerousness when it comes to the nature of the choices he's making. I'm one who is not an advocate of impeachment of Obama, but of the people that surround him and have been enabling him, people like Eric Holder, the arrest of people involved in the IRS targeting. I do think that and this is a unique dynamic with Barack Obama that is undeniable. He represents something significantly important to a significant number of Americans. We as conservatives, certainly as some of us as libertarians, as supporters of what Governor Palin stands for, though, we have a responsibility, I think, to make sure that all Americans realize that symbolism is important, but when it comes to the impact on our lives immediately, that becomes even more important. So I think that the conversation as a whole is very important, and I think the governor realizes the nature of the conversations that get started because of what she says and what she thinks is important.
Palin says Obama's committed at least 25 impeachable offenses, kind estimate maybe, but what a sad state of affairs that we are even at this point. And I think you make a great point that this also kind of chooses up sides, if you will. You already hear some comments from Boehner, really not expected, but if you get rid of his guys from the other side, that cuts down again on the country club and the golfing and the go along to get along deal.
Well, there is, and we saw this certainly when the governor was the vice presidential nominee, and we've seen it, for generations. We have a system that's like a club. It's a collegial environment where everyone supports everyone else, and there is a hesitation at disturbing the status quo, which for the people in the system, it has been working very well. For the regular American out there, it hasn't been. And this is, I think, what the strain is and what the conflict represents. And so there's people like Governor Palin, I think, who remains close enough to where she can have an impact and an influence within the club and the collegial environment, but obviously is one of the few people who still is in touch with the nature of what's happening with the average person. And I do think, as an example, like whether it's something like impeachment, it brings up a larger conversation about, gosh, if we're going to impeach someone, if it's inappropriate to impeach Obama, we can still have the same kind of conversation and action that can stop his actions by looking at the people that have surrounded him, that have protected him, that have given him some plausible deniability, and others also in the politicized system, like Eric Holder, like Kathleen Sebelius, who, we talk about, already Lois Lerner in contempt of court. But what about a Kathleen Sebelius, a person who moves in, facilitates something that damages the country? We've got to consider whether it's the VA or the EPA or the DOJ, all the alphabets, who's been managing the nature of what's happened with these entities that have destroyed the Americans' confidence in the government itself and in the individuals. And I think Governor Palin still serves a very unique role in being able to bridge the gap between what's happening with the political elite and what's happening and their impact on the regular people.
You mentioned the EPA there. Your latest column discusses the EPA and wage garnishment. What's the story there?
Yeah, this is where it's fascinating to watch. You've got an EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, which should be abolished, that has set up what they call as a new rule that doesn't require the congressional involvement, that if they deem you owing them money via fines that they also are able to levy without congressional involvement, that they will be able to garnish your wages minus any court order. In other words, removing your ability to have due process if a government agency takes your bank account. Now, I think this is a test. As an example, they threatened to fine a man who'd built a pond on his private property, that he violated the Clean Water Act, they said, and they were going to fine him $75,000 a day. He's a regular guy, a welder from Wyoming. And if the government is capable of, without congressional involvement or judicial oversight, they fine you $75,000 a day and then take money out of your account and you having no ability to challenge that through due process, that's what this rule effectively codifies. And it's not just the EPA. I think this is a test to see if they can remove the court system from actions that they take. And so my column is, first of all, exposing that to some degree, but then also telling people, hopefully, that they go to the Federal Register, and there's a comment period of 1 month. They said if they don't get a negative comments, then it's going to automatically go into effect on September 1st. And these are the kinds of backdoor actions that Obama's agencies are taking. And it's unacceptable. It certainly is unconstitutional. Some would argue that that is also criminal, but a lot of people have been getting away with a lot of things, and Obama has been the first person to, as a role model for these government agencies. He's been lawless. He's ignored the rule of law. He's done all sorts of things that seem to be emboldening people at every agency.
Yeah, there's a lot of agencies. If they have an acronym, they may very well be up for being abolished if we had our way. IRS,
if we had our way,
there's a few.
We were hoping, of course, that Governor Palin, with, let's say, a Romney administration, would be the head of the Energy Department, of which she could then just decide to dismantle it. That should be the job of every politician that we trust, is the dismantling of the government.
When you see all the things that are going on in Washington, doesn't it really even make the GOP establishment even more frustrating than liberals? Most liberals, at least if they, will come. Obama said he wanted to fundamentally change this country. They'll tell you what they want to do on a lot of issues, whether it's guns or taxes or national security, whatever you want to talk about. But then you have the enablers, as I like to call them. These guys in the Republican Party who campaign one way and then get in and say, we couldn't really do it, and it's the go along to get along deal. And I think that really has people banging their heads more than anything.
Well, yeah, I think what it shows you is that government, post-Reagan, government has, and courtesy of the Bush family, has gotten so big that everyone involved is now part of the problem. And that it is so gigantic that the mentality of politicians is that, it's so big, it's impossible to undo. Our job now is to manage it. So they see government in its the horrible monster form that it's in as something that now they're in charge of to manage, and they forget the impact and that it actually has an impact on real people's lives, that the average citizen begins to look as just like a cog in the wheel. This is the mentality now that has taken hold because it has gotten so out of control. And I think that bit by bit, as we move people in, whether it's a Ted Cruz, I know a lot of people are fans of Rand Paul. I have my concerns about Senator Paul, or Mike Lee, who seems to be very good. I like Walker out of Wisconsin as well. There are some politicians out there who understand that we must still rage against the machine, but also take action to dismantle these elements that have made it the monster. I mean, I like government. I like the role the founders wanted it to play, which was about the national security. What we have now here, though, is a Godzilla. And the scientists, I think, are afraid of their own creation. And so now they just want to manage the creation. And our job as independent conservatives and for your listeners as Palin supporters is to remember what that initial movement was, to a government that is reflective of what the founders envisioned, a constitutional government, and to vote in as many people as we can. It is a slow process, as we've seen. We're going to be disappointed by some of the people that we have supported and we're excited by, but we've got to make sure that the excitement for regular citizens, citizen candidates remains, so that we continue to have the choices to be able to vote people in. It's like eating an elephant one bite at a time. It'll take a while, but eventually that elephant will be finished with the elephant. And it's about the focus and discipline and patience, but a dogged focus so that we continue with our work.
Right, and don't give in to these predetermined fates, as in a Bush versus Clinton matchup in 2016, right?
I'll tell you, at this point, because the parties are still in control of so much, we may be facing a presidential race that is abhorrent to us. But in the meantime, if we control the House and the Senate, and we're having that influence there, but I think that we always must push for the dream result, and then if we don't get the dream result, then we must continue. Then we adapt. And look, let's remember, General Washington lost many more battles than he won. He was a man who was not a winner in the field most of the time, but the battles that he won were the important ones. And when he lost his battles, he lost New York. We lost virtually almost everything. And he continued on, though, and his soldiers continued on, even in the face of horrible defeats and the odds being so against them. It was that kind of discipline and an understanding that it was worth fighting for, and knowing that the important battles were what we had to win the important ones, and General Washington did, and the result is this battle today, the realization that we're all General Washington now, we are all President Reagan, and that we must have that same kind of determination and focus.